Cleveland Browns, as we're on John Harbaugh watch, we're on Stefanski getting fired watch. Keep an eye on that Hawaiian leprechaun over there. And there's a lot going on. We got a lot of coaches coming in for interviews, calling up coaches, they're interviewing the coordinators right now. We're going to discuss that here today. But before we dig in, you need to click that subscribe button right now. We're going to keep you in the loop of
An NFL reporter just went off on John Harbaugh's outrageous contract demands, and the entire football world is losing their minds over what he's asking for to coach Shedeur Sanders. $20 million per year, total control over the roster, the power to select his own GM, and a $10 million staff budget. Shannon Sharpe couldn't believe what he was hearing when these demands got leaked, but here's where it gets absolutely insane. Chad Johnson had to step in and defend why Harbaugh is demanding all of this. And when you hear the real reason behind these massive demands, you're going to understand that this isn't about greed or ego. This is about a Hall of Fame coach who finally sees a young quarterback worth betting his entire legacy on. And that quarterback is Shedeur Sanders. The debate that followed exposed everything wrong with how people view Shedeur's situation in Cleveland.
I think there are four definite candidates for Harbaugh to end up with. Cleveland now is, I think, fourth.
Okay.
Miami.
The Giants.
Giants in Atlanta.
There was some improvement there. And I sit here and I get ripped left and right. I read this all the time where I say he makes you relevant. Guess what? People talk about the Cleveland Browns because Shedeur Sanders is on the team, regardless of whatever he does on the field. That is a fact. And that is a fact when you have a high-profile quarterback that has millions of followers on social media.
Look, I need you to understand something right from the jump. When Shannon Sharpe and Chad Ochocinco start debating something on Nightcap, you better believe it's because there's real smoke behind the fire. These aren't just two former players talking for content. Shannon's got connections throughout the entire NFL. He knows what's happening behind closed doors. And when he brought up John Harbaugh's contract demands on the show, his reaction told you everything you need to know. The report came from ESPN's Cleveland insider Tony Grossi, not some random blogger, not some hot take artist looking for clicks. Tony Grossi, who's been covering Cleveland football for decades and has direct sources inside that organization. And the list of demands? It's absolutely jaw-dropping. $20 million per year. Shannon immediately jumped on that one, pointing out that only Andy Reid currently makes that kind of money, and Reid's earned it with 6 Super Bowl appearances, 3 championships, in 6 straight AFC championship games. Harbaugh's resume? 1 Super Bowl win back in 2013. That's over a decade ago. Shannon's tone wasn't quite blasting Harbaugh, but you could hear the skepticism, the disbelief, the "wait, you're demanding what?" energy in his voice. But Chad Johnson, Ocho, saw it completely differently, and this is where the conversation got really interesting. Ocho said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that's not a bad thing, especially for somebody like Harbaugh that knows what he's going to need. If I'm going to Cleveland, I know what I need in this room to be able to succeed. I know what I need in this room to be able to compete in the AFC North, let alone compete week in and week out in the NFL. Stop right there. If I'm going to Cleveland, that's the key phrase, because Ocho immediately connected Harbaugh's demands to the Cleveland situation. Not the Giants, not the Dolphins, Cleveland. And who's the quarterback in Cleveland that an elite coach would need to build around? Shedeur Sanders.
Not a problem.
Not a problem. $10 million assistant coach budget.
Not a problem.
Okay. Total authority over the roster. And also would like to select his own guy to lean on, personnel guy.
Okay, so would he be making the draft picks? Like, you're going to ask this guy? That kind of makes me feel uneasy.
Now, before we go any further, let me break down the rest of Harbaugh's demands, because each one of them is specifically designed to create the perfect environment for developing a young franchise quarterback. $10 million staff budget. Shannon broke this down perfectly. You're going to need to pay your offensive coordinator $1 million to $1.5 million. Your defensive coordinator the same, maybe up to $2 million depending on who you get. Then you've got position coaches, quality control, analysts, the whole infrastructure. But here's what Shannon didn't say that I'm going to point out. A $10 million staff budget means Harbaugh can go hire the absolute best quarterback coach in the business, someone who specializes in developing young QBs, someone who can work with Shedeur daily on mechanics, reads, decision-making, all the technical stuff that separates good quarterbacks from great ones. Total authority over the roster, not some input, not collaborative decision-making, total authority over the final 53-man roster. Shannon emphasized this. He didn't say, I'd like to have some input. He says, total authority over the final 53. You know what that means for Shedeur? It means every single roster decision can be made with one question in mind. Does this help Shedeur Sanders develop into a franchise quarterback? Draft an offensive lineman? Only if he fits the blocking scheme that protects Shedeur. Sign a receiver? Only if he runs routes that complement Shedeur's timing and accuracy. Build a running game? Only if it takes pressure off Shedeur while he's learning. Everything, every single decision can be optimized around maximizing Shedeur's potential. And finally, Harbaugh wants to select his own general manager, not work with the existing GM, not have a say in who the GM is. He wants to pick his own general manager. Shannon's reaction to this was basically, wow, that's a lot of control. But again, Ocho saw the bigger picture. This is where Ocho dropped the comparison that makes everything make sense. He said the Cleveland Browns are almost in a situation where the Cleveland Browns are not only desperate for a head coach that wants to turn the culture around in general, but it takes you back to the situation with Deshaun Watson, where they were desperate to have a quarterback who had done what he had done previously with the Houston Texans.
I'm in for that because he's a football guy, and I love football guys. He's a guy who bases things on feel, and there's a lot of like, this is what we got to do stuff, and obviously I appreciate that. I'm all in on Harbaugh. I think he'd be obviously the culture everybody would want to. There's a standard he has, and I think he would hold these guys to it.
If not Harbaugh, are there other head coaches or candidates that interest you the most?
Well, I really like there's a couple of guys, but if you ask me, I think Brian Flores would be the guy I really like just because of the discipline thing.
Let that sink in. Cleveland was so desperate for a franchise quarterback that they threw everything, picks, money, guaranteed contracts at Deshaun Watson, and it blew up in their faces spectacularly. But Ocho's point was this. Now you have opportunity with John Harbaugh to get a winning coach, one that needs full control because he understands what he needs as a team to be able to compete. Cleveland learned their lesson with Watson. They learned that desperation leads to disaster. So this time, if they're going to make a big move, they're going to do it right. They're going to give the coach, not the front office, not the owner, complete control to build the team the way it needs to be built. And here's where the Shedeur angle becomes crystal clear. Shannon mentioned later in the conversation that he thinks the Giants is the best situation because they have the most stable quarterback situation. But think about what Harbaugh actually needs. He needs a young quarterback he can develop from scratch. He needs a quarterback who hasn't been ruined by years of bad coaching. He needs a quarterback who's hungry, talented, and ready to buy into a championship culture. That's not the Giants with a rookie they're about to draft. That's Cleveland with Shedeur Sanders, who's already there, already shown flashes, already demonstrated he's got the tools. Now, I know some of you are thinking, but these demands are insane. No coach should get that much power. And you know what? Shannon Sharpe kind of agreed with that sentiment. He kept bringing up Andy Reid and pointing out that Reid earned that $20 million with decades of success. But here's the twist that nobody's talking about. Harbaugh's demands aren't about what he's already accomplished. They're about what he's willing to bet on accomplishing with Shedeur Sanders. Think about it. If Harbaugh gets everything he's asking for in Cleveland, his entire legacy is on the line. He's betting that he can take a young quarterback everyone has doubts about and turn him into a champion. He's betting that his system, his culture, his coaching can overcome all the dysfunction that's plagued Cleveland for 2 decades. That's not ego, that's confidence, and that's exactly what Shedeur needs, a coach who's confident enough to stake everything on developing him into a franchise quarterback. Shannon made another point that's absolutely critical. He said you need to understand how quickly things come or how long it comes. It could be taken at any point in time. He was talking about coaching jobs being volatile, about how fast you can go from hero to fired in the NFL.
My point about Shedeur and anybody advocating for him to get the starting job with no competition, which I think is just ludicrous, and I don't think any coaching candidate would come in, and even if that got them the job, I don't think any coaching candidate would come in and say that. In fact, if they did, I'd be like, cross him off the list. There's no way he's just trying to butter us up for a job.
Well, if Harbaugh's taking that risk, if he's putting his Hall of Fame reputation on the line by demanding total control, doesn't that tell you he sees something special in the Cleveland situation? Doesn't that tell you he believes he can win there? And the only way you win in Cleveland right now is by developing Shedeur Sanders into an elite quarterback. There's no other path. Deshaun Watson is done. The rest of the quarterback room is a disaster. It's Shedeur or bust. So when Harbaugh demands $20 million, he's not just asking for money. He's saying, I'm worth this because I can turn your quarterback situation from a liability into an asset. When he demands total roster control, he's not just power hungry. He's saying, I know exactly what pieces we need around Shedeur to maximize his potential, and I'm not letting anyone interfere with that vision. When he demands to pick his own GM, he's not just being difficult. He's saying, I need someone in the front office who shares my vision for building around a young quarterback, not someone who's going to fight me every step of the way. Every single demand is about creating the optimal environment for Shedeur Sanders to succeed. And Shannon Sharpe's skepticism? That's the old school NFL mentality that says coaches shouldn't have this much power. But you know what? That old school mentality is exactly what's kept Cleveland in the gutter for 20 years. They've hired coaches, given them no power, interfered from the front office, and watched it fail over and over again. Harbaugh's demands represent a completely different approach. Give the coach everything he needs, let him build the team his way, and hold him accountable for the results. And for Shedeur, that's the dream scenario. Because right now, he's stuck in an organization where nobody knows who's actually making decisions. Is it the front office? Is it the owner? Is it the coach? There's no clear chain of command, no unified vision, no coherent plan. Harbaugh's demands would fix all of that instantly. One voice, one vision, one plan, all focused on the same goal, turning Shedeur Sanders into a franchise quarterback. Shannon brought up an interesting point about the Ravens still being on the hook for $34 million of Harbaugh's current contract. That means Cleveland would only need to add about $6 million to get to that $20 million number. Shannon said it perfectly. You just gotta add 6 to the pot. That's it. You good to go. $6 million to get a Super Bowl winning coach who's willing to bet everything on your young quarterback? After what Cleveland paid Deshaun Watson, that's pocket change. But here's where Shannon made the point that completely validates everything I'm saying about Shedeur. He said Harbaugh knows in order to win, you've got to have a quarterback. You're not going to win a Super Bowl like you did before, where you get Flacco, he gets hot down the stretch and he plays great for 4 or 5 games, and then you have an outstanding defense to back him up. That's over. Not you. You're not winning like that. You need that guy. Listen to that carefully. Shannon Sharpe just said you need a franchise quarterback to win in today's NFL. You can't win with game managers anymore. You can't win with a great defense carrying an average offense. You need that guy. And when Harbaugh looks at Cleveland, who's the potential that guy? It's not Deshaun Watson. It's not Bailey Zappi. It's Shedeur Sanders. So all these demands that Shannon's questioning, they're not about Harbaugh being unreasonable. They're about Harbaugh understanding that if he's going to develop Shedeur into that guy, he needs complete control of the process. He needs to hire the offensive coordinator who can design the perfect system for Shedeur's skills. He needs to draft the offensive lineman who can protect him. He needs to sign the receivers who can get open. He needs to build the running game that takes pressure off him. He needs to create the culture where a young quarterback can make mistakes and learn without the pressure destroying his confidence. All of that requires power. All of that requires control. All of that exactly what Harbaugh's demanding. And you know what's beautiful about this whole situation? While Shannon's sitting there questioning whether Harbaugh deserves these demands, Acho's the one who actually gets it. Acho understands that Cleveland is desperate enough to give Harbaugh everything he wants because they finally learned their lesson. They can't cheap out on building a winning organization. They can't interfere from the front office. They can't hire a coach and then undermine him. They need to go all in on one coherent plan, give that plan time to work, and trust the process. And if Harbaugh's the coach who can make it work, then pay him. Give him control. Let him pick his GM. Let him build his staff. Let him construct the roster. And most importantly, let him develop Shedeur Sanders without interference. Because here's the reality that nobody wants to acknowledge. Shedeur's got the talent. We've seen the flashes. We've seen the arm strength, the accuracy, the decision-making. What he doesn't have is the infrastructure to maximize all of that. Harbaugh's demands are the blueprint for building that infrastructure. $20 million says, I'm worth it because I can develop quarterbacks. $10 million staff budget says, I'm going to hire the best coaches in football to work with Shedeur every day. Total roster control says, every player on this team will be here because they help Shedeur succeed. Picking his own GM says, the entire front office will be aligned with developing our young quarterback. That's not unreasonable. That's not outrageous. That's what it actually takes to build a championship organization around a young quarterback like Shedeur Sanders in today's NFL. Shannon can question it all he wants. Shannon can point to Andy Reid and say Harbaugh hasn't earned that level yet. But Shannon's also the one who said you need a franchise quarterback to win. And if Harbaugh's the coach who can turn Shedeur into that franchise quarterback, then he's worth every penny and every ounce of control he's demanding. The real question isn't whether Harbaugh's demands are too high. The real question is whether Cleveland is finally smart enough to meet those demands and give their young quarterback the best possible chance to succeed. Because if they do, if they give Harbaugh everything he's asking for and let him build the perfect environment for Shedeur, then all the doubters, all the critics, all the people questioning these massive demands, they're all going to have to watch Shedeur Sanders become exactly what Harbaugh believes he can be. So here's my question for you. Are Harbaugh's demands outrageous, or are they exactly what it takes to build a championship organization around a young quarterback like Shedeur Sanders in today's NFL? If you want to stay locked in on every development in this Harbaugh-Cleveland-Shedeur situation, hit that subscribe button right now. We're bringing you the analysis that connects all the dots before anyone else. Drop a comment and let me know. Would you give Harbaugh everything he's demanding to develop Shedeur, or is Shannon right to question it? Let's talk about it.